Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1319 of our daily content grind. So I thought I would have a little bit of fun, creative process today. So I got to thinking about how the original Transformer toys were selected between Autobot and Decepticon. If you aren't aware, basically they took all the Diaclone toys, basically laid them out on a table, and kind of played with them the way you would as a kid, kind of deciding who the good guy and bad guy was and trying to just make us an entire sides and factions for that, which is how you come up with the original Autobots and Decepticons. Now, that it should hold true to later ones, but they decided to flip a few things around. So the original combiner teams we got were originally designed for a spin-off of Diaclone. So that does mean the toys pre-existed before, technically before Transformers, at least before Season 2. And that does mean they might have been subject to the same thing. Now, the way fate worked out, they decided to be contrarian with things, giving the Decepticons some land vehicles, some aerial vehicles to Autobots. But maybe, what would have happened if the same principle worked out, So here's what I have done. Just as a creative challenge to myself, I've taken some of the classic G1 combiner teams and I have inverted their roles. What would happen if these characters and toys were decided to be the opposing faction rather than the familiar ones? To that extent, I have renamed everybody, recasted everybody's personalities, and basically come up with completely new teams. I've almost shattered glassed all the combiners, even though a lot of these are not portrayed the way that Shattered Glass probably would. And we're going to start with one that you would think would be the hardest, because Combaticons are absolutely designed to be on the Decepticon side. However, as Computibots, you do have to view them in different ways and try to come up with different ideas for them. So, meet Onsite. Onsite is one of those leaders who leads from the front. He never sends his troops into a battle that he cannot fight himself. He likes being on the front line. He likes taking the risks so his teammates do not have to. And he is relentless in his pursuit of a target. If he spots his enemy on the battlefield, that is it. That enemy will not leave that battlefield on their feet. He is relentless in his assault once he has spotted an enemy. And usually an opposing enemy general, knowing that that's how you end a fight the fastest. If one of those things where okay, do you want to kill the Kraken? Go for the head first. Don't go for the tentacles. That kind of leader. So, do you see where the flips come in? Do you see how this is going to work? Okay, so let's go to one of the weirder ones, just so you know exactly where we're going with a lot of this. I have dubbed him Spindle. Spindle is selfless and minimalistic. He does not keep much possession for himself. He would rather give it to his teammates or his fellow Autobots. Now, he lacks the heavy weaponry and long range of some of his other Combatibot teammates, so he focuses on crafting. He's the expert scrounger of the team, and he's known to be able to make strong armor or repair weapons on the spot from even the cheapest scrap that he digs up. He's not a fan of repairing weaponry, but he will do it for the greater good. That is kind of opposed to Swindle. But I kind of I think it's a fun little way of taking this Jeep and amongst all these military vehicles, which I know Jeep is, but you get the point, and kind of giving it a new identity. This is Cyclone. He's the face of the team. He is an extrovert. He loves the interaction with humans and other Autobots. That's his energy. That's, where he thrives. He's a rescue mission expert. He flies overhead to find evacuation routes and coordinate his team's rescue efforts. It is a little weird to have a bunch of military vehicles show up to, say, an emergency site, but when you imagine how much rubble a heavily armored tank could get through, how much debris or how many rescued people Onslaught could take away on such a large truck bed, and aerial rescues, for a helicopter, you can kind of start to see it. And I kind of want Cyclone here to be the face of that. Here's Takeoff. I've based him on one of my favorite characters from the 90s. He is a space case. He usually communicates to his teammates and other Autobots in very strange, almost coded dialogue. Almost like he's memeing on everybody, but he's the only one who gets the meme. Most do not understand him, but he's almost endearing and charming with it. He is the orbital expert. He can scan from high orbit to monitor an entire battlefield. And when I mean an entire battlefield, I don't just mean where the fight's happening. He sees the enemy bases and what they are doing, and he also sees the routes that they are taking, meaning he knows how to cut off enemy reinforcements. So whereas, Cyclone handles things on a ground level, he takes it one step further and looks at the big picture. Between the two, you have an incredibly tactful amount of information you can use. Crawl here is slow, but he is the most heavily armored of the team. He's more self-sacrificing than everybody. He uses himself as a shield, both for his teammates and for civilians who might be too close to the fight. And it ends him up on Ratchet's repair bay more often than not because he would rather defend others than participate in the battle himself. His main advantage is the torque that he has in vehicle mode. Like I said, he can get through heavy amounts of debris to get to buried victims, as well as haul away enormous amounts of rubble and clear rescue sites a lot better. Combined, they form Brutron, who is the most heavily armored of any of the combiners, essentially a walking phalanx that can soak up enormous amounts of damage, doing so to protect anything or anyone who happens to be behind him. His typical strategy in combat is to get as close to his enemies as possible this way before unleashing all of his firepower at closer range, which will minimize any potential casualties or collateral damage. So just a big walking behemoth of armor. And that's the Computabots. So, we're going to flip over. So if we do that, what happens if we do the aerial bots? And as you can see, a perfect photo of a Silverbolt here to start us off. If we want to make these guys mean. The Aerocons are led by Thunderbolt. This guy's got a superiority complex. He never touches the ground and thinks anything that cannot fly is inferior. I know that's part of Thundercracker's backstory, but they never use that part of Thundercracker's backstory, so we're just going to ape it for the main personality of Thunderbolt here. The only thing that keeps him in line is how intimidating Megatron can be. He does look down on Megatron, but he also is intimidated by Megatron, which is the only reason why he hasn't pulled a Starscream. His abilities in battle include manipulating ion charges in the sky, meaning he can literally generate lightning bolts for combat. I gave him the most terrifying ability I could think of, and just being able to just, Zeus somebody on the spot, I think that was pretty good. Skyfall, and I'm perfectly aware that I'm stealing a Micromaster's name for this. Keep in mind, this is what if they had cast the original Combiner teams differently, which means this name would have still been on the table. It counts. I imagine Skyfall is a character who is rarely seen in the day. He is a stalker, he is a saboteur, and he prefers to fly by night for all of his missions. He is skilled at being able to disable both security, computers, and opponents with the least amount of effort as possible. If there's an exposed circuit, a loose wire, he knows how to notice it, and he knows how to sever it as quickly as possible. He enjoys deploying EMP tactics, especially against aerial opponents, not just because it's effective, but because he really likes watching them crashed into the ground. Catapult. This guy is jovial. Like he would be the clown of the team if he wasn't so sadistic about it. He has a very sick sense of humor. His signature abilities include the tow cable that he can deploy in the aerial mode. It's not only allows him to pick up any kind of target on the ground, which would be anyone who needs kidnapping, anything that needs stealing, but also any opponent that he finds on the ground who cannot fly themselves, especially, other, opposing Autobots. His favorite thing to do is to fly an enemy up using the tow cable and then loop to fling them into the distance just to amuse himself. And sometimes if he's really feeling nasty, he can weaponize that using an Autobot as ammo against other Autobots. Fun guy. Firefight is heartless, cruel. He is not one to shy away from any battle tactic that would be seen as unsavory or, war crimey in some way. He prefers flyby attacks with napalm, especially if it's an organic target, because that's just how sick he gets to be. If he has to fight in the air, he will generally prefer guns rather than missiles because he feels it's a little bit more personal. He likes to feel the recoil of the shot that's going into his opponent. Sick. I wanted someone on the team who's just messed up. And that ended up being Firefight. Airblade is a calculating character who is also fearless. He keeps a lot of maneuvers in mind that for anyone else would be too risky to take, but he has a mind that's calculating enough to know how to execute them with minimal risk. And he does so because his ability allows him to channel energon through the edge of his wings, essentially turning them into gigantic blades. He is a fan of slicing wings off of opposing aircraft, but also flying low and severing any Autobot on the battlefield, whether that is horizontally or, if he's feeling particularly nasty, vertically. He's efficient, is what he is. Superan is a little bit different than the rest of his team. Because of the weight of his combined mode, he's lost the ability to fly, which angers every single part of his combination. So all of that anger gets directed into his fighting style. He is brutal, he is rage-filled, kind of think of like a mechanical Hulk here. The difference is he still has some of the abilities of the jets, including all of their thrusters, which he uses to propel himself into straight line directions far faster than a combiner should. It allows him to punch and kick with higher impact because he can go faster than his servos allow. It's a really brutal version of the character. It's a really brutal take on a combiner. Now, the weakness to him is, yes, he is far faster than a combiner is, but as I said, it only works in straight lines because he's working with jet thrusters. So you can take advantage of that. He is dodgeable, but if he catches you, you're done. The main opponent for them, of course, is the Stuintibots, led by Motivator. He is a history buff. He is always ready with a story of a great Autobot legend, a mighty victory, from Optimus Prime in the past, largely to inspire his troops with. He aspires to have stories told of him and his team like that someday. It may or may not have influenced his vehicle mode choice as he looks up to Optimus Prime himself through all the war stories. The trailer itself, I imagine, would often include rescue supplies rather than, enemy troops or armaments. And in extreme, emergency situations, he'd be able to actually shuttle ambulances and first responders faster than their own vehicles could. Nice guy, maybe a little bit head in the clouds. Let's say that. Drag Race. This one's got a bit of an ego to him. He is super proud of his speed, but it's not just because it's not for showing off. He does not show off with his speed. He is proud of it because of the prowess it allows him to do. He is the team's first responder. He is the team's recon expert, meaning his speed allows him to get into a place faster than anybody else, rescue anybody who is in immediate danger, or recon the situation very, very quickly before returning to his team. He is incredibly fast at processing a situation in order to bring that information back to Motivator and the rest of them as fast as possible. Wild Slider is the drift racer of the team. He is a risk taker. He never shies away from any possibility, no matter how absurd it is, because, you know what? If I get lucky, this might actually work, which does lend him to taking way too many risks in certain situations. But when it works, it does get things done faster, and it does lead to a faster rescues, or puts enemies down and stops a fight a little bit faster. So it's a high risk, high reward type character. If he's facing one-on-one enemies, then he likes to use his drifting to mess with the heads of anyone he happens to be fighting, as they don't expect a car to have that level of maneuverability and motion to them. Okay, so how do I Autobot the name Dead End? Because it is a very ominous name, and synonyms didn't work, like flipping words didn't work. So instead, I have named him One Way. I've named him after another road sign. He is the optimist. He always believes in moving forward and learning from every situation. He is something of a psychiatrist. He knows how to analyze an enemy's mind in order to find mental weaknesses that give him an advantage, though he would rather talk his opponents down with it than directly fighting. More than one Decepticon has switched to the Autobot side after a one-on-one encounter with One Way. That's just the kind of person he is. And then there is Can't Name and Breakdown, so I've instead decided to call him Tuneup. He's the team medic, and he's the old-fashioned body man type. He can repair you with just a hammer and a blowtorch, which he always has on hand at every particular moment. I imagine him to be a little bit on the salty side. In G1, we didn't have that salty war medic type that we saw out of Ratchet in animated or Prime, so I'm kind of giving that characterization to Tuneup instead. The combined mode is Intimidator. Now, both because he prefers psychological approaches, he would rather scare enemies into retreat rather than have to proceed in a prolonged battle. I'm throwing a Dale Earnhardt reference in there because race cars. He is still a powerful warrior, though, and he is skilled with a sword, more so than you would expect a combiner to be. But he does have to be fast to be able to use it. With a lack of long-range weaponry, he does have to be able to get in quick in order to actually put it to use. And whereas Superan is fast in straight lines, Intimidator has a lot more maneuverability to him. So he does manage to get around firefights and out of blaster fire range in order to get close enough to actually put his sword to use if necessary. And if it's against a combiner, he's always aiming for the connection points. He's always trying to disable. He's never trying to eliminate. Now, I could continue this with the obvious ones, but I feel like Constructicons would all be too similar. It'd be too easy. Because they're still builders, they're just good guy builders, and frankly, Defensor's too hard. I would have to have a very long session to figure out how to do a combiner that is Decepticon, but all Earth rescue vehicles. I'm still toiling on that one. However, I wanted to get in 4 teams here, even if it makes the video a little bit too long. So I thought, let's just throw my favorite team in as well, as long as we're doing this. Let's hear from the Technocons, shall we? Shattershot here is a living weapon, heavily fortified, lots of weaponry hanging off of him, and he's always obsessed with creating and finding more and more powerful weapons for his own use. His own alt mode has been heavily augmented with the heaviest cannon he could possibly find, and his entirety of his vehicle mode is devoted to firing that weapon as easily as possible, whether that's in a ground emplacement mode or using the heavy thrusters that the vehicle mode has to fire it from the air without any recoil knocking him out of the sky. Which I love. I love when you just kind of like take his vehicle mode and kind of reinterpret the design details like that. It actually makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. I flipped the personality here to create Afterbreaker. He is quiet and calculating. He speaks only when necessary because he is always thinking of the next thing he needs to do. He is the master of high-speed combat. In full speed, he can perceive the world so quickly, everything starts to slow down. It's almost like battling someone who has psychic vision of what's about to happen, as he's just that skilled at reading what's going to happen in the next moments. Incredibly fast character. Like, this is like rivaling Blur fast, and he can fight while he's going that fast. On the other hand, you have Frightspeed. Frightspeed is macabre, he's morose, he is very grim in the way he speaks and his mindset, but he uses that to his advantage. He knows how to prey on the fears of others. He's taking brainwave scanner tech that Soundwave used to employ, and he's merging it with holographic abilities stolen from Hound in order to literally create enemies' worst fears in front of them, which he can use either directly in combat or to just mess with his opponent long enough to get the drop on them. I like characters. It's a very Scarecrow style character, but Transformers doesn't really have any of those, so I thought I'd throw one in. Strife loves conflict. He likes watching conflict specifically. He's more than happy to just sit back and let the two sides fight it out and just have like a bag of Energon popcorn on standby. He is an expert hacker and information broker. He is known for placing false information in the hands of opposing sides, both to start wars and escalate wars, mostly for his own amusement, but he can also use the misinformation to the Decepticons' advantage to lure their opposing enemies into false situations or directly into traps. Devious type, devious and just joyful in just watching others try to kill each other. And then we have Warhead. Warhead is the team's complainer. He's never happy with his position on the team, largely because his alt mode prevents him from really joining in the direct fight, which he would really like to. Unfortunately, he's a little bit too slow for that. He is the demolitions expert, however. He analyzes structures in order to find the weakest points that they have to either bring down a building or a defense fast as possible, or to find the weak spots in any opposing Autobots and disable them instead. Combined, you have Computator. He is one of the most heavily armed of any of the combiners. He's taking he's taking Shattershot's ideal of just more weaponry and just amplifying it tenfold. Guns upon guns. It also does not help that many of these Technocons have very, very high analytic capabilities. So when you put all of them into Computator, then you have someone who can perceive and calculate a battle strategy in nanoseconds, being able to study whatever's happening on the battlefield and exactly what he needs to do next in order to secure a victory as quickly as possible. He's basically the same as Computron in G1, but he doesn't get slowed down by indecision. All he cares about is the percentage. Once he knows the possibility that has the highest percentage of victory, he immediately executes it and tries to execute anyone in the way. So, that's my take on flipping 4 of the G1 Combiner teams into their opposing faction. Now, there's plenty of combiners out there. This can also go beyond G1. If this is something that you liked, if you had fun with this, if you like this idea, there is always more to do, but you have to let me know in the comment section if you want me to do a second one. Inversely, there is always the Patreon where someone can just force me to do this one again. But either way, there's room to do this again if you want me to. So, for now, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.